Good morning, everyone. Eric McCool here of Permagora Live, coming back at you. Wanted to look at an article or two here that I've been reading and thinking about, and I was going to try and flip the screen around so you could see this, but apparently I can't do that while I'm recording, so I'm just going to read it to you, and you can look at the article yourself. This is from the MIT Technology Review Journal, and the article is entitled "We're Not Going Back to Normal," and essentially what it says, the subheading is social distancing is here to stay for much more than a few weeks. It will upend our way of life, in some ways forever. It's a chilling headline, and not that we didn't kind of already know, it has already upended our way of life, but people are all hoping that this is just temporary. And what this article is claiming is that it's not temporary, and this is exactly what I was concerned about, was that this will be used as an excuse to do some things that have never been done before, and once they've been done, it's kind of a foot in the door, and it'll be real easy for the government to hang on to powers that we gave up in a panic, and they don't really have any excuse for maintaining that level of control of society once this supposed virus outbreak is contained. Then, what's going to stop them from just maintaining the checkpoints and maintaining the curfews and maintaining the social distancing laws? Because social distancing is a nice euphemism for people aren't allowed to gather. And freedom of assembly to gather is the First Amendment for a reason. Freedom of speech and assembly are kind of the same thing. Freedom to say what you want and freedom to gather in groups so that you can speak. It's all about speaking, and it's about sharing in our sense making. If you want to learn about sense making and how important it is and how hard it is to do in our current environment, I highly recommend another, I don't know to call him a journalist or a scientist or a thinker. He's almost a philosopher, but Daniel Schmachtenberger. It's a little bit, it's a long last name that I'm not going to spell for you, but SCH, think SCH, German, Schmachtenberger. He's probably one of the most brilliant minds of our times, and he talks a lot about sense making in our society and how it's very difficult to do because of polluted information streams. We don't know what to trust. We don't know what's true anymore. And there's incentive for people to make disinformation. And that incentive is financial or in some cases political. You don't want people to know what you're up to so that you can compete against them. And because of this expanding system of upping the ante every time, what we get is massive disinformation that is basically institutionalized and engraved into the structures of our society. And it gets to the point where we now don't know what's true. We don't know about this virus. And for all of you who are trusting the WHO or any of these organizations, I would like to challenge you to admit to yourselves that you actually don't know. You are just trusting what they say. You're listening to them and saying, oh, well, they say this. And it's like, well, can you trust them? And if you have to think real hard about whether or not you can trust government institutions to tell you the truth, then I feel sorry for you, because you should not trust them to tell you the truth. They have a very, very long record of lying to people, as well as rounding people up and murdering them. And I don't just mean our government. All governments essentially have done this. And we know that our government has. We know what sort of a history our country has. And we should know better than to blindly trust that when they tell us that they're going to lock us all in our homes for our own good, that it is for our own good. So back to this article. It's now widely agreed, even by Britain finally, that every country needs to flatten the curve, a nice slogan that they created, which basically it's just something for people to repeat to make them feel like they can do something about this, and it's just a few sacrifices on my part and it'll make it better for everyone. That's kind of what that phrase carries. It's encoded in that phrase is this notion that it's easy for me to make a difference and do my part, and it's going to be a sacrifice. I'm going to have to give up some things I usually enjoyed, like my freedom, but I can do it because I'm a good person. And people who are talking about flattening the curve are saying that because they think that that makes them a good person, or that means that they're doing the right thing. And I'm not trying to be hard on anyone who's using that and thinking that that's what needs to happen. But I'm just warning you that this is how they operate. They come up with slogans like support the troops. Noam Chomsky had a great talk about that. He's like, what does that even mean? It means nothing. It's vague. It's like they don't want you to think about the policies that they're creating they want you to support the troops, which is easy to do. Anyone can think they do that. But to actually analyze the decisions that are being made and the policies that are being set, that's not what the government wants. They don't want us to think in that high of resolution. They want us to take a simple phrase and wave our flags and say, yay, hooray, we support this. And this is the way campaigns work. Think about all the slogan campaigns people have, hope and change. It's like, that's all people needed. A few little words and like, oh, great, hope and change. Everything's going to get better. We don't have to worry anymore. Wrong. So anyway, impose social distancing to slow the spread of the virus so that the number of people sick at once doesn't cause the healthcare system to collapse, as it is threatening to do in Italy right now. So it's up to us guys, they're saying, to just distance ourselves from each other socially. But the question is, for how long? Like, how long does that work? If nobody goes out and gets sick, doesn't that mean that as soon as we all start going out into the world again, we're at risk of getting sick? Like, how can you expect that this is going to stop something that can... Is it just going to completely die off after a few weeks or a few months, and then it's gone forever, and then we're all safe and we can come out again? Like, I don't get it. How long would that take, and how draconian do social restrictions need to be? Yesterday, President Donald Trump, announcing new guidelines such as a 10-person limit on gatherings, said that with several weeks of focused action, we can turn that corner and turn it quickly. But it won't end there, the article goes on. As long as someone in the world has the virus, breakouts can and will keep recurring. Oh, so this might just be, okay, lock up for a few months and then, oh, sorry guys, got to go back into quarantine, month on, month off. And I think it might actually even say that later. This article has graphs explaining the sorts of, you've seen the spike of everyone getting it at once. And okay, so listen to this. What counts as social distancing? The researchers define it as all households reduce contact outside the household, school, or workplace by 75%. 3/4 of your social life has now been declared illegal. I don't know if it's actually been declared illegal, but that is the criteria by which they're going to make these laws. Mark my words. It doesn't mean you get to go out with your friends once a week instead of 4 times. It means everyone does everything they can to minimize social contact. The overall number of contacts falls by 75%, so just spread out over time. Under this model, the researchers conclude social distancing and school closures would need to be enforced some 2/3 of the time, roughly 2 months on and 1 month off, until a vaccine is available. A vaccine. Whole other issue. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I just would say this. They got the flu vaccine, right? Does it work? Does it prevent you from getting the flu 100% or 95% of the time? And if not, then what are we even talking about it for? Why are we pretending like it's going to help? Under this model, I said that until a vaccine is available, which will take at least 18 months, if it works at all. That's a big if. Let's see, 18 months, surely there must be other solutions. Why not just build more ICUs and treat more people at once? The researchers' model said that this didn't solve the problem, and there's graphs showing, if we do nothing, if we isolate, if we close schools and universities, all these different curves that they're plotting. But to me, this is a fancy way of making it look like they can predict all of this and they know what's happening, and we just, graphs are a great way to convince people that information is legitimate and scientific, regardless of whether or not the interpretations of the data or the framing of the question at all are valid. And this is a very tricky thing that goes on in propaganda. The propaganda has been developed for over 100 years. They've been mastering this science of crowd control, of manufacturing consent, of getting people to believe things that go against common sense. It goes against common sense that you shut down the entire world just because there's a virus. I feel like that's going to cause more deaths than the virus, by far. And how? Because of riots, because of food shortages, because of any kind of shortage. It's like we live in a very fragile civilization where everything has to work just right for us to get our food and to have lights and refrigeration and for there to be transportation. And we have to have transportation because none of us live where food grows, right? So we're in a real delicate spot. And to shut everything down is madness. It's just madness. And again, of the people that I've spoken with that defend these ideas of, quarantine and self-isolation, they're doing so under the assumption that the government's telling them the truth about all this. And I can't tell you enough how bad of an idea it is to assume that the government is looking out for you. So this goes on with more fancy graphs, and This isn't a temporary disruption, it's a start of a completely different way of life. In short term, this will be hugely damaging to businesses that rely on people coming together in large numbers. And then it goes on to list like a whole lot of businesses. I'm not even going to read them all, but just think about it. Cafes, bars, restaurants, nightclubs, gyms, hotels, theaters, cinemas, art galleries, and the list continues to go on. That's to say nothing of the stresses on parents thrust into homeschooling their kids, people trying to care for elderly relatives without exposing them to the virus, and people trapped in abusive relationships. Anyone financial cushion to deal with swings in income. So that's something that I thought about as I was driving around yesterday. I felt like I saw a larger number than usual of people out there flying signs trying to get money in the corner. And then I started thinking, what are homeless people going to do in a crisis? They can't shelter in place. They don't have any place to shelter. What are they? Are they just all going to end up in concentration camps? Like, if there's a curfew and they don't have any home to go home to, are they just going to be arrested? And then what? Charged with what? Like, the following some of these policies to their logical conclusion just reveals how idiotic they are and how completely untenable all of this is. And the only way it makes any sense is if the plan is to rush a whole bunch of people off to concentration camps, which they've already built and we know about them. So what are people thinking when they say that we can just all stay home? It's like, what about people who don't have a home? What about people who travel for a living? There's people who travel around their vans and go to national parks. I read yesterday the national parks are closing because people are flooding into them thinking that they can just ride it out there. But there's a lot of people who do live out of their RVs or their vans. And how are they going to remain quarantined? Are they going to become criminals now because they have no home to go to? So we have a lot to think about when it comes to dealing with this and what is actually going to be reasonable. And I feel like it's not just going to be like the state, the county, the local governments are going to come in with total draconian fascist. They're going to probably, as individuals, be pretty considerate and compassionate, but there's going to be a lot of just doing my job, stuff. Oh, well, sorry, I don't really agree with this, but this is what the governor said, so we have to, enforce this curfew and those sorts of things. At the beginning, the soldiers, the police that are enforcing these terrible ideas. I saw a great meme that basically stated that without police, politicians are just men with bad ideas or bad opinions. And that's pretty much the way I see it, is like the police are going to be trying to do what's right and they're going to be trying to keep people safe, and except for the ones that are murdering people, which that's a whole other story. But there are good police for the most part who are trying to just like keep people safe, and they're going to be out there apologizing for what they're doing probably. But the question becomes, how long can they do that before they either have to choose to become a monster who would, pull the lever in the gas chambers, or who would, shoot someone into a ditch? How long does it take for them to become that? And there's a book, I can't remember the title of it. Jordan Peterson always talks about it. It describes a police force in Poland, I think, during the Nazi occupation, and how they turned these ordinary law enforcement guys into these psychopathic monsters just with social conditioning, sort of Milgram experiment stuff. Please continue the experiment. Please continue, enforcing these laws. And eventually it warps the minds of the people who have to enforce them. And they just get in this one-track mode of looking for enemies and watching for people who they have to treat as an enemy. And so I'm concerned about what it's going to look like at the local level, but I'm also feeling like at first it won't seem so bad. And that's part of how this works. It's part of the frog in the boiling pot. We're not going to be seeing a total Iron Curtain tomorrow, but I assure you they're building it. It is being built with all of this legislation, with all of these people making these broad claims, like Trump saying no gatherings of 10 or more people. Like, really? I can't get over it. I can't get over the fact that he could just say that, and a large portion of the American population is like, oh yeah, I guess that's smart. I guess we have to follow that. To think that in one sweeping motion they could just take away our right to assemble and our right to just freely travel around and go where we want to go. It's mind-boggling. And this article by the MIT Technology Review is, I think, trying to pad that and trying to say, oh, it'll be okay. There'll be some adaptation. I'm reading again. Gyms could start selling home equipment and online training sessions, for example. We'll see an explosion of new services of what's already been dubbed the shut-in economy. We can also wax hopeful that the way some habits might change. Less carbon burning travel. Oh, convenient there, you know. I don't know if y'all are familiar. Most of the people that I'm close with in the circles on the internet know of Agenda 21, but I've got several, worlds that I walk through, and I'm sure plenty of y'all aren't familiar with Agenda 21, which is essentially a globalist plan to completely transform society by moving everyone out of the country, stopping people from traveling so much, and basically locking people down in smart cities where they can be controlled and letting nature restore itself. Which, after seeing things like the Venice canals run clear and seeing wildlife and clean skies in like big cities that are usually full of smog, like there's something appealing about that. Don't think that I'm against people like cleaning up the planet by staying home. It's just this the proposition here, the reason that it's happening, the backstory to all this is what's so alarming. But there are some cool side effects of it, and I'm trying to feel like, how can we make that happen just by our own sort of community consensus actions? Why do we have to have a totalitarian government with armed soldiers who will come and take you away if you don't obey and comply? Is that the only way we can make these things happen? And that's pretty much what the globalists think. Their opinion is that, oh, these cattle, these goyim, they're never gonna do the right thing on their own. We have to round them up, and we'll have to cull the herd. We'll have to wipe out a whole bunch of them because they're just beyond saving, and we are gonna have to force them to follow environmental regulation laws and to not drive their cars because it's so polluting. And that's always been their reasoning, and Agenda 21 has been one of those things that is basically a plan for over this century, the 21st century, to roll these things out and to pressure and coerce governments, national governments, to get on board with these things. And I feel like now we're seeing this whole thing happen, and it's the same agenda, the same result. The results are the same. It's just a different excuse. They came up with an excuse that people are going to swallow. And so that's why it's so alarming, is that it's kind of working. And I feel like they're getting closer and closer to their new world order. And this was a 9/11 scale progression of that plan. This was an event after which we will never be the same, as this article is saying. We will be forever remembering this event as what changed everything. Even more so than 9/11, I'm convinced. In the near term, we'll probably find awkward compromises that allow us to retain some semblance of a social life. Maybe movie theaters will take out half their seats. Yeah, down to 10, right? Meetings will be held in larger rooms with spaced out chairs, and gyms will require you to book workouts ahead of time so that they don't get crowded. In other words, get ready for bread lines, people. Get ready for waiting in line much longer for everything you want to do. Ultimately, however, I predict that we'll restore the ability to socialize safely by developing more sophisticated ways to identify who is a disease risk and who isn't, and discriminating legally against those who are. Ooh, let's discriminate legally against people who are a risk. That's real specific. And this, he's probably trying to say that it's going to be very scientific how we determine that. But trust me, the process for determining who is a risk and who needs to be quarantined is going to be about as clear and defined as the process for who is a terrorist. It means whoever they say is can be taken away, or can be, drone bombed without a trial. That's pretty much the way this thinking works, is when they set a law that can be very sweeping and reaching. And that was the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, I believe it was. It was kind of another blow against the people from the globalists of basically authoritarianism. It gave the government legal right to assassinate its own citizens just on the suspicion that they're terrorists. And so that's been a law for 8 years now. And I feel like they get away with this stuff by passing the law and then not really using it very much. And then people kind of forget about it. But now we're in a situation where they're discriminating legally against people who are a risk. And they don't define what makes you a risk, and if they do, it's going to be with more subjective terms. They're not going to have a little meter that they come up and go, oh, there's a risk. And maybe they will. It's Facebook, it's social media algorithms and things like that. But what's a risk about people that are going to be taken away isn't that they're going to get other people sick. What the risk is that they're speaking out, like Duncan Lemp and like so many others who stand up and say, hey, this isn't fair. They're targeted. And, you know, we haven't even seen the beginning of that. Like, I am very concerned in that department for the number of people who are going to be swept away in the night or just killed by the SWAT team or taken to some facility without a trial. Because in order to pull off a total takeover of this world and to implement this New World Order agenda, they're definitely going to have to take out the resistance, because there's plenty of resistance. There's plenty of armed and organized people who are ready to fight. And the goal, I think, for this whole process is to make this unfold slowly enough so that those people aren't ever triggered to think this is the big one, everyone at once. It's just, you know, isolate, hit these ones while these ones don't know or don't think it affects them, and so they don't get involved. And so it's just they're going to pick us off one by one, and until there's enough, you know, until there's too few people to make any noise. And of course, the freedom of the internet, like the article I posted from Ron Paul the other day about how this was a hoax, got taken down by Facebook because they said it was inaccurate. And I read it again, and I'm trying to think, what about this is inaccurate? State authorities love panic as well. The mayor of Champaign, this is Ron Paul now, mayor of Champaign, Illinois, signed an executive order declaring the power to ban the sale of guns and alcohol and cut off gas or electricity or water to any citizen. Okay, so now the government can cut off your water and your power. Why? Because they think you're a risk. I don't know. Why would they do that? Why would they cut off someone's water and power when you're locked in your house? I don't know. But yeah, Ron Paul is a great voice for liberty. He always has been. And for them to censor this article and say that it's disinformation, he doesn't have any facts in here that are incorrect. I mean, he's given the same numbers that they are. He's just interpreting them differently, and so they call him, you know, disinformation. And that's the sort of thing we're going to see more of too. We're going to see government thinking, oh, this is an emergency, we can't have anyone spreading disinfo. Heck, I'm going to be surprised if these videos get taken down, because I'm obviously not pulling any punches here. I'm not giving the government much benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't really trust them at all, right? Like, so I've gone over 20 minutes here. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to be continuing to work on making these videos more concise, but at the same time, this is a lot of information, and it takes a lot of time to process it. And as I get into more dialogue with people, once I'm on live, there's like a chat, and people can comment live with it, and I think that helps a lot for me to sort of gauge what's getting through and what is, you know, stirring up interest. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up, and I hope y'all have a great day. Hope you are taking measures to be prepared, and hope you are in communication with all the people that you want to work with in this new reality that's being rolled out, because we got to stick together, y'all. Peace.